Hey, well, good evening. For those of you that are joining in the chat, it's good to see everyone. And for those of you watching later, hope you're all having a good day. Oh, thanks for the orderings. Very, very much appreciated. I really do enjoy the orderings. So, hey, we've gone to jury. If you've been watching the news, well, the Danny Masterson trial is winding down. Now, we had Friday and Monday off from court. Judge Olmedo, the state rested, or the defense did not again bring a single witness, nor did Danny Masterson take the witness stand to defend himself. As is his choice, his right. They can do what they want. But again, they provided a witness list. They had several witnesses on there, all psychologists, a toxicologist, Bree Schaefer again, who was Danny's assistant and who is mentioned in one of the Jane Doe 1 stories repeatedly because they were friends, so she knows she brought her there. And again, not testifying. Also, not Claire Headley's stepfather, to go against what she said in Scientology. Nope. The defense decided to stay quiet and not contest any of the testimony besides the cross examinations that they did with the witnesses. They're going to let all that just stand. I can't say I was actually surprised. Are you guys surprised? I mean, did you think this time they might actually bring witnesses? I'm just curious. Well, for me, I really didn't see how getting in that and allowing the prosecution to actually cross-examine their witnesses could have been bad. I do see how if they wanted only one side of the story, that no, they weren't going to let their witnesses get cross-examined, especially not Bree Schaefer. And I can't see how Claire Headley's stepfather could have actually spoke well for the case for Danny Masterson. He would have spoke well for Scientology, I'm sure. And that would have been his main goal. I don't think it would have been good for Danny Masterson in any way. You know, uh, good to see you, Mrs. Cassandra, Mousy, Anna, always. Yeah. So, Crazy Cat, Chill, or Chill. I hope that puppy's not making you too crazy. Well, fun, huh? Raising a puppy. My goodness. Always I was not that surprised at all. I don't think it would have done them very much positive in regards to um, any help for Danny Masterson's side of this at all, getting his story out. I really don't see it. Um, I don't see how it would have helped. Thank you very much, Shill. Thank you, Shill, very much for gifting 5 more memberships to the channel. Mrs. Cassandra, Verillion, Ashley Childers, Liam Wakefield, Michelle Ferguson, all recipients. And nice to have you here for another month or so. And Shill says, Poppy is getting better. Me, I keep falling. Yeah, I saw that, girl. You gotta protect yourself. Puppy is getting bigger and better, and Shirley is falling a lot. Puppy giving you a hard time. I'm sorry, boo. Yeah, that last one did look like it hurt. Okay, thank you so much. And everyone, enjoy your free memberships. Thanks you, Shill, for being such a wonderful supporter and for always being here in a fantastic mod. Oh, thank you, Mousy. Your favorite true crime hotspot? Thank you. I guess I should get to talking about the true crime part of it then. But thanks. I appreciate that. I really do. Thanks for cheering me, guys. I mean, it's been a tough. I mean, we've been off for 4 days. Um, they didn't have trial until Tuesday. Judge Olmedo they didn't have court on Friday or Monday. She did give jury instructions before she left for the weekend. And again, Judge Olmedo is very precise in her jury instructions. She gets really into it. She tells them they can ignore all of the testimony or not. Like just because they don't believe one part of it doesn't mean the other parts of it aren't true. that they're pretty open to how they actually address what they find to be credible evidence and what they don't. She did redefine again the charges to make sure that they were very clear that force did not only mean holding them down. Okay, force was also in there. In the charges is the word force, but it's also coercion. Okay, and a couple of other words that she explained to them to mean that, if it was against their will in any way, if without their free thought they would have agreed to it, then it was against their will. Oh, she went into detail about that, which was great because a lot of people may need to hear that, especially based on the cross examination, the way it was done. Um, she also went in. Just because you don't scream just because you're not screaming doesn't mean yes. I mean, no is no. Okay. Now, one of the biggest things that happened in the cross examinations and also in this trial that was different than the first trial, because I've been thinking about that all weekend. What is so different about the retrial than the first trial? How can it go differently this time? We ended up with a hung jury after several days of deliberation and arguing, and they just decided they were deadlocked and nobody was going to change their mind. Nobody was going to change their mind. So there was a mistrial. We got here again. How is the evidence different? How was the cases presented different? How were the opening and closing arguments different? Well, it really stuck out to me is in the actual, on the prosecution side, in the actual dealing of especially the Jane Doe's testimonies, dealing with them with the jury to make sure they went through all of the pieces of their whole scenario of how they got here. It wasn't as jumbled up this time. Ariel Anson, deputy DA for Mueller, that took the lead in most cases on this, and she was very thorough walking them through from how they met Danny, what the relationship was like from the start, how things went, especially with Jane Doe 3, who had the longest relationship with Danny Masterson. Um, the time that she took to explain the whole relationship, her relationship with Scientology, how she got into it at Danny's request, um, how when there was problems, how they dealt with it. She kind of laid the whole thing out, including how she started to feel about what happened to her, about reporting it to Scientology, the steps that were taken, the reports that she made, the ethics training she had to go back through, all of it step by step, including the meeting of the other Jane Does, including reporting it to the police. Every step, step by step, how they got here, how they got eventually into filing a civil lawsuit, and why. This is what she did with Jane Doe 3, and she did the same thing with Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2. Now, we know that in cross examination, Sean Hawley and Philip Cohen, it was in their cross examinations that they were picking apart the words that were used in reporting all of the events. All the Jane Does reported the events and had interviews multiple times with investigators, detectives, prosecution, and even depositions with the defense. Okay. And the defense spent a lot of time picking apart words, explanations. Well, why did you mention this in this one? Well, you didn't mention it in that one. Now, that happened the same in this trial, and more so. Sean Hawley was particularly good at just narrowing down on one single statement, twisting it around, and then making a statement to the jury as to what she thought it meant. But she was clever enough to do it mostly in question format, so she never got called out really for arguments during cross examination. Not like Philip Cohen, who got called out quite a lot for that. She didn't bring in any of the prior testimony from the previous trial, which Philip Cohen had a little trouble kind of coaching his language not to actually quote them for the previous trial because he wanted to. Because again, he wanted to show that every time you talk about it, you say something a little different. Now, the prosecution did bring a witness who explained that. Barbara Ziv explained about memory a little bit, and about opening, talking about it, how it's going to be different. And even when they talked with the detectives in regards to the case, they said if you had 5 different interviews, 5 different people, which you get 5 slightly different stories, and it is depend on interview style, the state of mind at the time. Um, Ariel Ensign went so far, Deputy Ensign went so far as to explain their state of mind, why these might be different. Actually, very much so, knowing that they shouldn't be there in the first place. Jane Doe 1, knowing that her actual first report was written with Scientology. It's like as if they were right over her shoulder. She brought her report from Scientology. It was written with Scientology, not able to mention the gun, not able to say anything about an upstat. Remember, Danny Masterson, in their eyes, all 3 Jane Does, an upstat. You cannot say anything bad about him, not without big repercussions to yourself. We heard from Jane Doe 2's friend, who said you can't say anything about an upstat. And she was talking about someone in a very unflattering way, the most unflattering way. Something was done to her by Danny Masterson, who's an upstat. Rachel became so unnerved by it. She didn't know what to do. She admits to treating her friend poorly over it, because you just don't do that in Scientology. And they were both Scientologists at the time. There were collaborating witnesses in all of the Jane Doe stories. Jane Doe 2 having the most, her mother, Rachel, Jordan Ladd, several friends. Okay. Jane Doe 1 also, Jane Doe 3. We had Claire Headley come forward and speak on the policies of Scientology. That was different. We got to hear more about the practice of Scientology of their blaming the person if something goes bad. In other words, everything that happens in your life, you're responsible for in some way. You made it happen. But in Scientology, it's like you may have done it to somebody before in your another life. You have done something, you've drawn it in, you've caused this. And at the same time, we can't say anything about Danny Masterson. We have to find out what we have done to cause this. That was what Claire Headley put forward in the knowledge reports and all. She talked about if they did say anything to Danny, it wasn't going to do any good anyway. It would have been in a, things that shouldn't happen folder. In other words, well, somebody complained about it, but unless Danny does something and we go after him, we'll never read or address this. It's just going to sit there in that file. We're not going to do anything about it. We heard how they coached the women's language so that they didn't say certain words that don't exist in Scientology. Because of the relationship that they were in with Danny Masterson, it was impossible for anything to be done against their will, because they were there to do whatever Danny wanted. It was pretty much laid out that way. And this all got explained in more detail in the closings this time. And like I said, Ariel Lansing did a great job. If you read Tony Ortega's Substack, and you'll see he was quite impressed also. I read every word. I read every little snippet I could find in what she said. She was elegant in the way that she pressed it, but she got the message home. The one thing that struck out to me, and I noticed also to Tony Ortega when I saw his video just a little while ago, Ariel Lansing opened up her closing arguments with this very powerful statement, which was not part of the first trial, but may actually make things clearer for this one. And Ariel Lansing said to the jury, it started with a drink. He handed them a drink. Yes, they got to talk about it a lot in this trial. They got to talk about the feeling of being drugged. They got to talk about they wouldn't have done these things if they weren't out of control. They got to talk about being out of their body feeling totally manipulated and coerced, ending up in places they didn't know where they were or how they got there. They got to talk about the feeling of being drugged. Now, no straight out accusation was made or charged. Danny Masterson, let's be clear, is not being charged with drugging them. There is no physical evidence. It's too late, too long. But we did hear evidence from a toxicologist that works in the police department, a detective who actually takes statements from women and men in this situation a lot and has to do the investigation involved of it. It said that the women's stories match up to those that have been drugged. The symptoms match up to date rape drugs that are commonly used. We got to hear all of that on how they may have acted outside of normal because of it. What are the common symptoms? How the memory can come in and out. We got to hear all of that. But we are not saying that Danny Masterson drugged him. The DA is not. He didn't charge him for that. Okay. But they're allowed to say why they felt and how they felt and what might have led to it. That was big for this case because, especially when a lot of the questions from cross-examination and in the closing arguments are, why did you stay? Why didn't you come? Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you do that? What were you doing here? You were in a relationship, as if it wasn't a big deal until years later when they decided to, under Philip Cohen's kind of theory here, conspire against Danny Masterson to ruin his life and make a lot of money, which I don't see. I don't see that happening, and neither did Ariel Anson in her closing arguments as she went through. Why would anyone put themselves through that? And I could say when Reinhold Mueller came back at the end and did the redirect closing, okay, after Philip Cohen, who did the closing for the defense, spoke for most of yesterday. Yesterday afternoon rather. He did address that why under conspiracy, why would anyone actually go through this? And I think we talked about this the other day. Like, why would anyone really put themselves through that, you know? Mm. Anyway, he was a very strong closing. They came forward to what they were actually trying to say in the evidence, and they made sure that they actually put forward that why would anyone, why would anyone do this? Why would anybody bring this kind of a case against somebody if nothing had happened? And I do know it happens. I've seen it happen. We all hear stories that women or men will do this in retaliation for whatever. But to this extent, this many years later, this type of humiliation, I really can't see, especially with the harassment that they had to deal with in regards to the Scientology end of it. Who would want to put themselves through it? You know? D.A. Mueller said, as he put up like all four of the victims, because remember, Kathleen, and it's going to be victim number 4 who spoke on it. He said, these are the women, and I'm going to show you them because it's not bad enough that that man over there has raped them, but he did so by drugging them, incapacitating them, by breaching their trust for some of them, and for one of them, Jane Doe 3, dehumanizing her, calling them white trash, spitting on her, pulling her hair, horrible things. And you can listen to Mr. Cohen coming up here, and he's got a job to do. And that's fine. But D.A. Mueller continued, when I listen to him, he said, I hear what these women have gone through. When he gets up here and essentially indicates that they're liars, that there's some kind of conspiracy light going on, that they have this motive because it's all about money. They want to sue about money, or they have some ominous for the Church of Scientology. Well, we don't want you to be fooled by that. And why do I say that? Because there's no proof of it. There's no evidence of any conspiracy. There's no evidence that any of that is true. It's very easy to get up here. As I said, these four women have gotten up, and three of them are still suffering the harassment and stalking. And yet they're up here telling you what happened to them years ago. They told you why they didn't come forward initially. They told you what it took to report to law enforcement and what they went through. There is no evidence, none, that they have done anything but come forward and speak out and have their voices to be heard. It's easy to call them liars, but where is the proof of it? It's easy to say they want to get back at the Church of Scientology, but where is the proof of Philip Cohen's statements? It's easy to say that they want to sue for a lot of money, but where is the proof in that either? This case, he says, was about the evidence. What has come into the case, not speculation, not some attorney's theory. It's about evidence. And when you hear, is it possible that we heard Mr. Cohen say, it is possible that they could have a motive? Well, it is possible that they could. It is. But where is any evidence of it? And where is any evidence to make you think that that's what they're doing? At this point, the judge did get a little bit annoyed and started to talk about admonishment, about how the attorneys are allowed to make their arguments that way. Okay. Well, when you hear the argument of an attorney in closing arguments or opening arguments, you have to ask yourselves, as D.A. Mueller cleverly pointed out to the jury repeatedly in closing, where is the evidence of what they say? You see, because Philip Cohen is quite convincing. According to Tony Ortega's reporting, he was dressed extremely impeccable, in one of his best outfits yet, and presented quite well, riveting when he speaks. He's quite convincing. And again, he used that chart of guilty to not guilty with all the actual parts of not guilty there. And he uses some of the jury instructions, but he doesn't read the whole thing. Several times, D.A. Mueller said, oh, when Philip Cohen spoke about this rule in the jury extensions, the rule of evidence, he didn't actually give you the whole story. He didn't. He talks about how if you get some idea that the story is changes, you get to say it's incredible. You get to say they're not credible and just regard it. But he forgets that in every story they're allowed to believe part of it or not. It just because they believe she got one detail wrong, or she may be adding something in later, and this could go for any of the witnesses' testimony, not just one or particular. Although Philip Cohen did actually pick on Jane Doe one's reporting the most, and you'll remember that's because the first reporting came right out of Scientology and was very limited, and she refused to use certain words that she couldn't, and she didn't mention a lot of the story that she told later to the detectives, and the story got more clear as she went. Jane Doe 3 in particular was very good at explaining why that was, in explaining the stories, about remembering things more clearly, about not wanting to call it what it was, not even understanding in the beginning what had happened to her. She knew how it made her feel. She knew it wasn't right. She knew something was wrong. Well, she loved Danny Masterson and freely admits that on the stand, that at that time, she was trying to find her way around it and get Danny help. because she knew what was happening wasn't right. But if Scientology told her it wasn't what it was, she was just going to try to get him help. And she just spent most of her time trying to work it out, get him over there to ethics like she was, because she really thought it was going to help. And she said that in testimony. Jane Doe, too, talked about how she's just socially awkward at the ball, that she didn't want anyone to know. Well, she told people. She left out certain words when she spoke of the story. She never used the R word when she spoke of it to her mother or even to her friend. But she did talk about violently being assaulted from behind until she puked against her will. And she was pretty clear about that. Well, she lost friends over it, and every time she mentioned it, something happened. She's the one who spoke about it out loud at a dinner table when asked, and lost quite a few connections that way and was shunned. She was called a liar. She was humiliated. And so you ask, why would people keep coming forward with it? Because it's wrong. And because they deserve justice. And because somebody has to write it. You know, somebody has to make it okay. Well, to this day, they are still being harassed. And as you know, Scientology came forward and gave them a hard time about that. Currently, right now, it is said in reporting that Scientology is actually pressing charges in LAPD with the LAPD about witnesses giving false testimony in regards to harassment by Scientology. There is plenty of reporting of Scientology harassing them. There was no reporting of LAPD not following up on it, okay? When the women said that things weren't being followed up on, they were talking about witness names that they were given, about not being in communication with the detective. They weren't alluding to that in that way, but they did have a major distrust of the LAPD at that time. And in all honesty, all over the social medias and common knowledge, there seems to be a common rumor that the LAPD is linked up with Scientology in a major way. They have kiosks of Scientology information there. They are big promoters of some of their programs, and you can see people high up in the LAPD associating with them on a regular basis. I mean, that could be where all the rumors come from, just in their association with them in that way. But as Judge Olmedo had laid out, we're not going to attack them as an organization or make them part of the case, because that's not right. They're not on trial here. Scientology is not on trial here. Their contribution to the case is just in their intimidation of the witnesses and their policies that kept them, the actual victims, from coming forward. Their interference that way in justice for these women. Now, we don't accuse them. We say they are responsible for the state of mind that the women had. That is the guideline that Judge Almeida has laid out. And that is pretty much where they kept in. But we got to learn a lot more about the how that happened, why they think the way that they think. And while we're speaking on them, this is Danny Masterson. Looks a little more worn. This trial, he does look a little tenser than when he started. Remember, he started with his cool glasses on the first day and his hair all messy, kind of looking a little more like Hyde, the friendly character from the 70s shows that we all kind of liked a bit, and not so much the shorter hairstyle that he was wearing at the end of the last trial. So he let it grow a little bit. He looks a little more relaxed. But that actually looks kind of tense to me. He doesn't look like things are going the way that he thought, and I don't blame him. He could be in for 45 years, life, guilty of all three. Big charges, big charges against him here. And he's not testifying to defend himself. The other person we spoke about previously, this is Ariel Anson. Now she's shown up in court every single day. She's a tiny woman, according to Tony Ortega. And it has, I found this picture. She does look to be tiny like me, or like about 5 foot, maybe a little bit, maybe a hair over or two. But she commanded that room. Tony Ortega, if you get the chance to read his Substack or watch his video on it, was quite impressed in regards to how she commanded the jury in speaking, how she got their attention, how everyone was listening to everything she said. She did such a great job. Yeah. And Philip Cohen in his lovely outfits every day. This was not closing argument day. This was probably the last Thursday or Friday, last Thursday, I believe, based on the outfit that I see in the picture from Philip Cohen. But it was a good shot of Ariel, and this is her in a close-up from her panel, from her wiki thing. Okay. Well, those closing arguments are very important because they are how the jury gets everything knitted together by the attorneys. It is then the attorney's turn to actually take all the evidence that they presented, and the DA will weave the story of what they felt happened in every instance. And then also on the other side, the defense gets to weave the story, the anti-story, pick the story apart and say, no, I believe it was this way instead. It is when they get to talk about what they think of the evidence and how they think you should be looking at the evidence and what matters and what doesn't from their perspectives, each from the state, the prosecution, and from the defense for Danny Masterson's team. They get to put their spin on it all. And it was quite interesting, the things that they want you to go back and forth with, Philip Cohen, in his defense, made a big deal about this time around. The state didn't call Detective Vargas back. Detective Vargas is the one who took over the testimony for the case from Detective Reyes when she was transferred out. Okay. Now, Detective Vargas gave good testimony in the last one, and all his files, all his reporting is still on file here. Okay. And they did refer to him in some of the Jane Doe's testimonies, of course, and Philip Cohen brought it up in reporting that way, but they didn't have him come and go over the reports or anything. And Philip Cohen was like, "Well, what does that mean? Like they don't want the truth, right? They don't want that they think that anything's changed. Like they didn't. Did you notice that they didn't bring him into the trial this time?" And D.A. Mueller very cleverly at the end of closing, because he gets to be the last one to speak. He said, I'm sure you realize that Philip Cohen had the opportunity to bring that detective in also if he thought that he had something contrary to add to the testimony that's being provided here. He clearly could have called him as a witness to say so, but he didn't. And that was a piece of immaculate lawyering, in my opinion, right there. Because Philip Cohen kind of thought he got one in there. But it looks like the state was ready for it. Just like they were just about everything. I have to admit the defense didn't make as many holes in the testimonies as they could this time. Things were explained about the gun. There were a lot brought in. Now, there was a lot that actually did get confusing for the jury. So don't let me kind of paint a rosy path here for verdict, because there's not one. Because there was a lot of shenanigans that went on. A lot. And that can be very confusing for a jury. If I was sitting on the jury, I'd be really confused right now, especially with the amount of shenanigans that went on with the Scientology, with Scientology coming forward, in being there in the actual courtroom as Vicky Podboreski, or a representative of her, of Jane Doe, one feeling intimidated by her, of the questioning back and forth. Well, when did you tell anybody about the intimidation, and why wasn't it Friday, and why was it Monday, and when did you say this, and when did you say that? They can all get quite intimidating. Then at the very end, there was a whole big thing in regards to an article that was written with Kathleen, the last victim to actually testify, one who's not pressing charges but is there as a collaborative witness. Kathleen gave an interview with Tony Ortega. I think it was back in 2021. And there were some things that in there when her memory, she admits her memory was different. It did not become clear until much later that the way she had remembered things, she had said some things that Philip Cohen really wanted on file. And they had to go back and forth. They wanted all of his original, notes and all of this, and they were going to subpoena him. And of course, Tony Ortega already had, do you really think that Tony Ortega doesn't have a lawyer all the time dealing with Scientology the way he does every day? I'm sure like he's got that button like right there because you know how litigious Scientology is, and they know who he is. They know who he is by now quite well. This is not his first go around with Scientology for sure. Well, the letter was ready and written. His lawyer did petition back to the court that it's not necessary. You have the article on the statements is what he has issue with. You have the article that you can go to. There's no need to disrupt my client's time. Plus, because Tony Ortega is a journalist, he gets 4 or 5 days to respond. Doesn't have to do it in a day. The trial would have been delayed a week at least. Okay. And they were going to jury, the sides had rested. They settled on a type of reading of what was going on. Okay. So there was a stipulation that they finally agreed upon between the state, before they actually finished up with everything in regards to closing arguments. So on the record, the judge said they're going to deal with the tweets first, and we could deal with the exhibits afterwards. So they're talking about tweets that Kathleen made that contradict some things she said in the interview, back and forth. What they did is they went through the article, they redacted some things, and Cohen and Mueller, actually defense in the state, agreed on the actual statement that would be put forward to the jury. Cohen read the stipulation that they're talking about. He said on October 17th of 2021, Kathleen J. made the following statements to Mr. Ortega in a published article. She remembered it was Masterson who chatted her up and offered her a drink, and the next thing she remembered was waking up in a hotel room in terrible pain. When her husband arrived and asked her why, she broke down, couldn't bring herself to tell him, but did years later. She said perhaps Masterson and others assaulted her. That she stated that Gerald Butler and others invited her up to his suite. And that is how he wanted it presented. Okay. And then they do have, a stipulation about the gun, and Anson actually brought that forward. And remember, I told you that they got that on file to the jury that Danny Masterson, at the time of statement that Jane Doe made about a gun being in his bedroom door, he did have a license. He was licensed to carry a gun. He did own a gun. He had a registered gun. And they did get that in. Okay. Now, there was definitely a Marsy's Law attorney there. Now, the Marsy's Law is the law that protects victims, okay, in regards to harassment, persecution, going, too far into their private lives and etc. during examination. Marcy Law is pretty speculative. There's been an attorney there the whole time. Jane Doe 1 in particular had her Marcy Law lawyer there a lot. She felt particularly intimidated and harassed. So there was actually a letter from them, and that letter is regarding the leaked discovery. There is great concern for the Jane Does in this case because the leaked discovery, and if you're just coming into this late, this is in regards to testimony we heard last week where D.A. Mueller came forward to Judge Olmedo, said he received a letter of complaint, his department rather did, from Vicky Podboreski in regards to harassment claims against Scientology, that the prosecution was allowing witnesses to lie against them and that they knew the truth, but they were not putting it forward. And attached to this complaint was was a link to a drive, a folder of their discovery in the case, interviews with the Jane Does, text messages back and forth to law enforcement, etc., etc. All kinds of compromising, unredacted personal information. This is of great concern to the Jane Does. Scientology is now in possession of the discovery of a criminal case. And Judge Olmedo wants to know how the heck that happened. And so does the prosecution. Now, the defense is saying they had nothing to do with it. But then Sean Hawley quite cleverly says, well, you didn't put a protection order when Tom Massaro, who was the original Scientology attorney who represented Danny Masterson, Tom Massaro, she throws him in there. Okay. And says there wasn't a protection order. And Judge Almedo says, well, I'm going to protect all of the evidence right now, but you don't need a protection order. It's against the law to disclose the evidence in a criminal case to anyone but the parties involved. You don't need a protection order. Anyway, it wasn't public record yet. The case is still going on. A protection order is when a case is not available. There is no means that this case is available currently. It's a criminal case going on. A protection order would protect files and names and things like that for when it becomes public. There was also during closing arguments, before they all got started and it got turned over, there was someone in the, there was a gentleman in the galley who was making Danny Masterson uncomfortable by giving him the evil eye a lot. And he was asked to like stop staring at him like that because he's making him uncomfortable. And the man said that he couldn't help how he feels. He can't help how he looks. And he says, I understand. The judge says to him, I can understand how you feel, but you can't be glaring at him nonstop. You just can't do that. Just try to keep a poker face. And then she asked everybody in the court, could y'all just put your poker faces on for me, please? And that was that. But anyway, there's a lot about harassment going back and forth, and that can be quite confusing for the jury. We don't want the jury to feel intimidated either. I get the question often, almost every time I come up here and speak in regards to Danny Masterson, on whether or not I think that the jury, this is our lovely Judge Olmedo, whether Scientology could be affecting the jury again. There was a lot of speculation that that happened in the first trial, but there's no evidence of it. You know, there's not. I mean, there was shenanigans. We all know about it. We all know about that jury foreman who went out and lied on his actual questionnaires, or actually just didn't give full information when asked outright if he had any connection to any case in the. He didn't say that he was an ex police officer. He didn't also say that he had a son who was accused of rape. Very good question. This is a good question. I'm glad somebody asked it. Let's talk about Allen charges here. All right. What happens if the jury can't reach a unanimous verdict again? Well, two things, and this is all speculation. Remember, I'm not a lawyer, but this is coming right out of judicial, right there for that particular area, okay, for LA County. But I do believe that she will send them back and say they have to try. I don't think a day or two is going to be reasonable enough for her. I do not believe they're going to want a mistrial again. Okay. But it won't prevent charges from being filed if there's another mischarge. If they feel they have a strong enough case, they just bring it again. Because of the mistrial doesn't bring double jeopardy in this place. She can actually put forth what they call Allen charges, where she very sternly says, you know, you've got to open up and listen to each other. You've got to look at the evidence, and you're going to have to say like what and what. And kind of like coerce them into really buckling down and getting to a verdict. That would be her goal, I'm sure. Um, I have a thought too, Jujubee. I'm actually. Would you like a link to come up and say it, or do you want to say it in the chat? Because I'll drop you a link if you'd like. Just let me know. But I know what my thought is on that. Um, especially this case, you know. And also, yeah, put your poker faces on. Can you believe a judge had to say that? Put your poker faces on, people. Just like a judge had to say, that's really not part of this. Like, stop it. Or can you believe this? Or stop harassing people. Yeah. Yeah, put it in chat, Juju. I'm going to let you go first before I weigh in. Let me just check the chat a little bit here. Hey, Jin. Good to see you. Paula, it's nice to see you too. Oh. Hey, Liam. Fish Nerd. Mousy, T King, really nice. You know what, T King, that smugness, which I think you're referring to in your comment, he really believes he would keep getting away with it. There is a sense of entitlement in all the stories that are coming through, and also in the way that the defense is handling the case. It does appear to believe that he does not believe he did anything wrong. And it may sound strange, but I can understand why he's thinking that way. He's been in Scientology his whole life, his whole family. It's all he knows. And that's what they keep telling him. They keep telling him that he's the upstart and it's not wrong. And there's nothing that he has to go through to change. He doesn't have to change. There's no issue there. He's successful in their eyes. He's doing great. This is all just people, suppressive people going against him, people that don't like Scientology, don't like him because they're out, they're others, they're not part of them anymore. They're fair game. I go back and forth from feeling a little bit of empathy for him and not. Currently, I don't, because it doesn't believe that he's ever not going to be a Scientologist. He's not going to grow out of it and he's not going to change. Why would he? He's got what he wants, right? Success. You know, as far as they are concerned with him, he's on the right path. He's doing everything he should. He is an upstart. He's got it all going for him. The only time I do get an inkling of I wouldn't want to be going through what he's going to go through is if he does get a clue. If he does get some self-awareness as to what he has done in treating of other human beings, people he said he cared about, especially. Liam says rich people who think they are shielded from the need to behave like ordinary people due to the protection of a powerful organization seems to be a theme in court recently. Yes, it does, doesn't it, Liam? A little too much, you know. Okay. And here is Juju's thought in regards to why juries have a hard time convicting on cases such as this. I think when the jury goes home and is pondering what they heard, it makes them look back on their own lives. They begin to look at certain events and occurrences differently. Then they start to think, if I say he is guilty, then I am guilty for that one night in college. Or if he is guilty, then that one night was actually me being assaulted. Yep. You know what? Spot on. I'm with you on that, Juju. Because I think that the jury does speculate, like, what if it was me? And what do I have? And here's the thing, consent, unfortunately, even now in 2023, is a blurry, often misunderstood concept. It should be simpler, but to be simple, it needs honesty, directness, and communication from two separate individuals. Which, let's be honest, even with my rosy colored glasses on, trying to live in the world the way I want it to be, that doesn't happen. Okay. People don't deal with it like I do. I'm very upfront. I'm not out there. I'm not what you would consider a woman of the world or anything like that. Uh, but am I honest and direct? Do people know where I'm coming from in my intimate relationships and all of my relationships, actually? I think so. When in doubt, ask. Okay. And for Christ's sake, no means no. But are there people out there blurring the lines on purpose? Yes, there are. Not even a taste that I know of women who actually say no like that just because they want them to fight back. Weird. I know. Crazy. I know. Hey, I'm not king shaming, but yeah, lines get blurred. So I'll just say for everyone, protect yourselves. Have the conversations. Okay. You know, have those conversations prior to anything really happening. I know it's not that romantic. I'm not saying that spontaneity can't happen, but usually clues you can tell, you know? I mean, come on. In this, let's just use the Jane Does, okay? If they're going to go back into college and look at these instances, then they're going to have to look at this. Was she too drunk to actually know better? Then maybe you've got an issue there. Were you too drunk too to actually know whether she was into it or not? Yeah, maybe you've got an issue there too. It could just be two drunk people having fun together, no problem. But it could be that maybe there is regret. If you're looking at it with regret, maybe your partner is too. And maybe there's an issue there. Okay. Did they push back and fight back with a pillow like one of the Jane Does? There's an issue there, jury person, if that's what you're thinking. I don't care if it makes you feel bad. You better make them guilty. Because, hey, if she pushed back with a pillow while saying no, and you pushed a pillow back on her to get her to stop and kept going, there's an issue there. You can't hide from it. I do hope that if there are these kinds of issues, like Juju and I are both thinking, everybody has something in their past they look at a little differently. Okay. Hmm. I would wager that most of us in the chat and listening have had an incident that we are looking at when listening to a trial like this, that we will go back to and say, what was it? What was it? There's some regret there. Help me figure this out. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. I've been there myself. It was hell to disseminate it and to figure out what happened. But if we're going to really be true to ourselves and true to how we're looking at the situation, then we must. And so I hope, Jujubi, I hope, and I know you do too, that if that is the case, that they will take the time, maybe not to actually analyze the situation they went through, but to be brave enough to call what is happening here with three of them right now with the Jane Does, to be brave enough to call it what it is, regardless of how it makes them feel and look at things in their life, because it is what it is. And if you ignore it, then you're contributing to it. If you get that little nagging feeling on you and then you still don't address it, then, well, you're part of the problem and not the solution. But I get it. Human nature. I get it, Jujubi. Total human nature. It's uncomfortable. It's horrible. This whole trial was uncomfortable. Do you think this was really like fun up here? I mean, I do enjoy talking to you all, don't get me wrong. But do you think it was actually pleasant to listen to the stories? You heard them? No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And is it actually even pleasant for me to think after all this time, a man who thinks he's grown and changed and now settled in his life is going to lose everything? No, that's uncomfortable too. Because really, the horrible part is how long it took. The horrible part is that there's no justice for anyone, even after this case is over, because the things that are happening still happen within the organization of the Church of Scientology. Let's be honest. Still happening all the time, or could. They haven't changed anything. We've had changes in the laws on how we treat victims who come forward, yes, but not in regards to Scientology or being hindered. It took years to bring this case forward. Years. And it took some real jumping through hoops too. If there were not 3 victims, D.A. Mueller wouldn't be here with this case against Danny Masterson, because just one woman wouldn't have the ability to do it, even with the loopholes in the statute of limitations based on the trauma they went through, based on actually their belief in Scientology and the actual pressure of being excommunicated from their whole lives, everyone they know, if they went forward. None of that would have mattered if there weren't more than one. But there were 3 that came forward. And so it fit the parameters of one of the loopholes that he had to jump through. And that is why Danny Masterson is facing a 45-year sentence, life. And the charges are penetration without consent, forcible or by coercion. By coercion. Fish nerd, that's a brave thing to say, and I commend you. And actually, the second part of it means more than anything, because he says, if ever asked, I can admit it. I commend you, because we've all made mistakes. We've all had those mistakes, drinking or partying or whatever. We've all been in these situations where we weren't exactly sure where somebody was coming from. But to be able to admit it, to know that something may have happened that the other person might have an issue with, means everything. Because now you've taken one of the worst parts away. You've actually rehumanized them. You've actually treated them again like an equal. And you actually showed you didn't have intent to do it. So I commend you. I do. And I wish more people were like that. But in this case, it's not like that, is that? No. On this case, we have an actual defendant who says absolutely not. Everything that happened to those women happened because they wanted it. Because I wanted it and I could. And I'm entitled to it. And there you go. That's basically the stance. And I'm going to say it because Danny Masterson didn't get on that defense, didn't get up there on that witness stand and testify that that's not what he's thinking. But that is what Philip Cohen laid out there. Okay, that is what Scientology laid out there. And that is what the women testified to. And because he didn't come up and say otherwise, I'm going to say it. I do believe he does not believe he did anything wrong. He says he's not guilty. He says everything was consensual. Everything was exactly what they wanted, at least the parts that happened, because he's also saying they're lying about all the rest of it. But there's multiple police reports and multiple collaborations. Okay. You see, they don't say there aren't any bruises on Jane Doe. They say they're not bad enough. They don't say you didn't fight back. They ask you, how hard did you fight back? They didn't say, did you not say, you didn't say no. They said, how loud did you say no? How often? Are you sure he understood? Yeah, those were real questions in cross-examination. Real questions. Including the fact, during closing arguments, that again Philip Cohen brought up with Jane Doe 3. You said in a police report that he was trying to penetrate you. Did he not? Because part of the definition, the legal definition, means penetration had to occur. She said, that's how I speak. I'm Southern. Trying is like doing is like the same. I know he did it. I felt it. It was uncomfortable. I said no. He went on anyway. But no, because she said the word trying, that was a big deal. Because that's how she started the report. There were so many things in this one that really got to me, and I know it got to a lot of you too. The way the victims were treated, well, that seems to be just the fine balance between getting the defense's side out and actually protecting the victims is is a fine line. I get that. It's difficult. The defense, I understand, needs to actually present their case. It should have the ability to go against whatever anybody's saying and challenge that information, challenge that evidence to the best of their ability. But it got to be quite uncomfortable when Sean Hawley's asking if someone's legs are open or how close was his face. Did you yell really loud? Why didn't you, get anybody else to help? Most of these assaults, all of these assaults happened privately behind a door with just the two of them. It made it seem like they didn't do anything to prevent it, even though they were shocked and they're not sure. Forgetting the fact that they altered. Trying to put assumptions on how someone would act in this case is, as Barbara Ziv had actually laid out quite well for us with the statistics. The way the Jane Does did behave was the norm. You don't fight back. You do question and you do blame yourself. You don't come right out and tell everybody. The shame and demoralization of the act itself keeps you from it. These are normal reactions. By study, by percentage, by people who have actually gone through it. And yet, victim blaming still occurs. We still judge them on it constantly. We heard percentages about how many in a relationship stay in that relationship to try to figure out what happened. Because you can't wrap your mind around the fact that someone you've previously been intimate with, in a relationship with, who loves and cares for you, would do that. You don't even want to, for your own well being, think it happened. All three of the Jane Does talked about the mental things, the mental gymnastics they had to do to even address the issue. That was some of the most painful part of the testimony for most of us to listen to. What they had to actually go through to get there, to even identify it for what it was. I wouldn't want to change places with them at all. Mandy has a suggestion. Men, keep a journal of your everyday activities and get written consent before sex. You're welcome. I hope it doesn't get that far, but you know what I mean, Mandy. Yeah. These things, yep. See you later, Mary Beth. Mandy says that Aaron, I believe that's from growing up in Scientology, and Leah think there is a bailiff, that would be Leah Remini, think there is a bailiff that Scientology has communicated with. Apparently, he is very chummy with Masterson and his team. That would be quite interesting, you know. Mm. Just think of the possible other violations of people hidden by the Church of Scientology, which will never come to light. This is true. Mousy, if you can't say anything, then the other person should take that as a no. No silence gives consent. I know this is what, yeah, that's no, silence is not consent. Jujubee, I agree. You don't go to the police, testify, cry, need counseling, and have nightmares years later because you got a night you wanted. True. Very true. See, this is what they're saying in the closing arguments. This is what Ariel Anson and D.A. Mueller actually, Reinhold Mueller actually pointed out quite well, that the evidence of their testimony, what they're saying, why would anybody want that? Like, you're saying they made it up, but why? For this? What are they actually gaining if it's a conspiracy? What is the actual gain here? Scientology is huge. They're not going to bring it down with this trial. And this Scientology is not on trial here. So to say that it's a conspiracy against Scientology, well, how if they're not named? How are they doing anything to them? They're making them a part of why they did what they did. Yes, but their Scientology is not going to suffer from this. Maybe have some things put out in the open, but really it gives them talking points. It proves to them, they're going to be able to point to it and say, look, these people are like coming at us. They just don't understand. You know, it, it really, having some of the truth out, yeah, it's damaging to their reputation. But the more people talk about Scientology, the more talking points it gives them to go at them, um, to actually offer conversation on the other side, to say that they're being picked on, that people just don't understand. Yeah. Jujubee, this is exactly like, I can just imagine the Jane Does how they feel about him, because she's like, sorry, I tried to downplay and distance myself from my trauma, Mr. Cohen. Next time I will be far more graphic. You insert any insult you see fitting here. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, very much. But that's part of his job, and I get that. And you want to be fair, that he's got a really tough job to do. I mean, this is a horrendous charges that he's actually defending Danny Masterson against. And they're going to have to try to get it that they're not true, that no part of it could possibly be true, because they are horrific. Yep, Mousy, I agree. She says also, when a traumatic thing happens to you and you have to tell someone, well, hey, I was hard. It's pretty easy to get into a denial situation. Exactly. Um, truly, truly. Liam, I don't think you need to get consent from yourself. As long as you are not hurting yourself, everything should be fine. Well, I don't know. This is, but you made me smile. Yeah. I get he is doing his job, but there is a way to not be smarmy lawyer, and I believe he is failing at the smarmy part. I agree. He does look a bit sleazy. Yes. Yes, he does. He also, this seems to be a little too focused on the Scientology part. And I think he could have did better for Danny Masterson, because the more he focused on the Scientology part and fighting against it, the worse it made it look for Danny as to why are they doing that so hard. Um, I think more evidence could have been brought forward into who Danny Masterson actually is, but they couldn't because of the Scientology part. And it does look bad. I get it. That's what he's supposed to do. I do believe that everybody deserves defense. I mean, we would all, if anybody falsely accused anyone here, we would absolutely want the best defense that we would get, smarmy or not. Okay. Um, but I'm like Juju here. I think I could defend someone if I actually believed that in them. I could. Okay. I don't think I could actually defend someone that I knew was guilty. And I guess that even that would come with caveats, like, because I do have strong belief in the system. So if I believe the system was corrupted some way and something was done against this person, guilty or not, outside of how the law is supposed to operate, yes, I would defend them. Does that make sense? Like, if I'm not talking about a small, like, clerical error or something like that. I'm talking about the whole process being corrupted in some way. Then, yes, I probably would defend them wholeheartedly about the system not working and that it has to be perfect to work right. It's never really perfect. but as best as it can be. Okay. I wouldn't want their rights violated. I would want them to have the opportunity to defend themselves the way the law is set up for them to, because everybody deserves that. Chandler Halderson's defense team is a good example of how you defend someone you know is guilty. True, true, very true. But you know who's not a good example of a defense team when you know someone is guilty? Letitia Stotch. Like that defense team, like what was that? She pled guilty. She pled guilty to that horrible crime, and they did have to listen to that horrible crime. Well, their job was to say that she was out of her mind, and I think they did a really bad job of presenting her defense. Not that I'm sticking up for her because I'm glad she's guilty. I don't think she was crazy. I think they had a terrible mountain to climb with that one. But what evidence that they did present on it? Come on, people. Was that not like ridiculous? Right? Yeah, it was actually Chantal Hosderson was the defense team was a good example of what to do when you know someone is well, guilty. But then Letitia Stosh, like that was just a complete failure. Exactly. She didn't. It was like they were all just trying. I don't know. Am I alone? When I watched what I did watch, and I will admit, I gave up actually watching the long days of trials quite early on when the testimony and the evidence got to be so graphic and the horrificness of the actual crime was right there in my face. I could not look at that woman. I couldn't do it. And especially knowing that she says she did it, that was it. I was done. I was done. I It was torture. Absolutely torture to go through any more of it. So I stopped. But the last few times I did, it was like her defense team was just sitting there. They're all just trying to get through. They're making jokes with each other. They're being all light and, you know, ignoring everything that's going on, just knowing that how it's going to come out. Like there is no defense. She's not crazy. She did this. She's a monster. And they're sitting there with her, you know, sharing coffee and looking at what the one time like her and Cook was sitting there looking at a laptop. They were watching a video or something. Um, Disconnected from the proceedings is what I would say. Exactly, Jujubee. That's probably how I would actually handle it too. In Holdenson's case, they made sure the law was followed. They stuck to procedure, which is exactly what I would want because that's where my passion is in how it gets done, and I believe in it. And I want to see it improve, but I also think like we're doing is the best that we can. I got great respect for everyone involved, including the defense attorneys. You know, and I too probably would have kept my mouth shut and let the state prove their case. They got the burden of proof. I don't have to. They're the ones making the accusation. They need to prove it. That's the way it goes. And I agree. It kind of was really hard to watch Starch and watch the defense. It was. Although I will admit, prosecution did a really good job, and D.A. Allen and his team did a good job. Um, yeah, giggling and carrying on. I agree. Another appalling defense rather. Oh, Elaine. Oh God, it's like the cardigan. Yes, Elaine and her cardigan in oh my God, in objection hearsay and all of that. But I have to say, because there was no that trial did not upset me anywhere near as much. Although Mandy and I will admit we were very invested in the looking at the evidence, and we had gone through all of these videos prior, and we had been looking at every scrap of evidence that was floating everywhere on the internet prior to the trial even happening. So we were quite invested. I think that's a fair statement, isn't it, Mandy? And So it was much more entertaining to go through this trial for me because we got to watch it actually play out legally and some things that did get admitted and didn't get admitted. But watching that defense team, I mean, that was a highly paid PR defense team, if ever I saw one. Like they were, and they did their best. They did their best. But in the end, their client is their client. And since their client was the one pulling the strings, she's the one who pulled that whole thing down, in my opinion. Jujubee, I'm right with you. It was the client. It not so much Elaine. She was a prestigious attorney until her this actual televised trial. And she got a lot of ridicule. And the Muffin Man. The Muffin Man. Oh my God. The Muffin Man was Dr. Curry's husband. Offered them. Yes, I get it. The Muffin Man, Elaine. Yes, Elaine was so upset. He's buying us off with muffins. Oh my gosh. Exactly. But anyway, back to Masterson. I don't want to keep everybody too long. I'm going to close up pretty early on this one because, like I said, I want you to actually go and give some credit to Tony Ortega for sitting in that trial day in and day out and doing the word by word for everybody to read. If you're not already on Substack reading his Underground Bunker or going to his website, both which I have linked below, check out his YouTube channel. He does he does shorts on it, on what's going on the with the case, and he's also doing interviews with quite a few people. But I give him full credit. It can't be easy. He's very invested in it. I always look to Tony Ortega as a journalist when it comes to Scientology because he's been there, he's done that. Yes, is it a little skewed against Scientology? Yes, it is. Should it be? Yes, it is. Based on what he's been through and what he's seen, I can understand it. But I also know he's fair. He is fair. And he writes about the issues back and forth that happen. And he just as much wrote about the mistakes that the prosecution made, that the defense made. And he very clearly really enjoyed when Judge Olmedo had something to say. And I have to say, I did too. And I thank him for putting all her words in there because they were glorious. But I recommend that you all read them. You know, you want to know more about the effects of Scientology on people that are in it and now out of it, and some of the policies and procedures and the way this is. There's also another ex-Scientologist out there that I listen to a lot, and that's Chris Shelton. I've had talks with Chris Shelton. I can't say enough nice things about Chris Shelton in how he deals with everyone in general around him. The stuff he has to put up with, his lack of patience at times, which I can understand totally, but also how he really tries to do the best that he can for everyone. And he's really out here just to help. And I encourage you to check him out too. Well, on that, let me just check for some questions. We're going to be on Jury Watch, okay? And as you know, this one's not televised, so I won't be giving you any jury verdicts live or anything like that, but we'll be back after we hear and give you a place to talk about it, you know. Jujubee has a good suggestion here. As a collective, let's vibe a right and just verdict for all the victims in this case, the Jane Does we know about and all the ones we don't. I I can put myself 1,000% behind that statement, Jujubee. Yes. And I do think there's more. I do think there's more. It seemed like a thing. So yeah, let us just hope that justice is served, you know. When the verdict gets announced, Jujubee, depending on the day and the time, usually, if they come back by Friday, I would definitely go live again for you guys Friday. Saturday, some we have things late in the day, whatever. But if not, it will definitely be either all day on Tuesday, be the whole episode on Tuesday. I may do a special episode on Monday. We'll see. But it depends, I hope they deliberate. And you know what? I will take them serious if they go through the weekend. Like, I'm afraid that they're just going to call it on Friday and then the judge is going to end up sending them back. I want them to go through the whole thing. I think they got a better chance of the judge accepting their verdict, even if they are in a lock on Monday or Tuesday. I think she wants them to be serious about all of this. I really do. But I have a feeling we're not going to hear it until the beginning of next week. I think as a I think this jury is taking it a little bit differently. And there are more women than men on this jury. Yes. There's been some speculation back and forth about that. Someone was reporting it the opposite way, but Tony Ortega did confirm in his last readings, reporting that it was more women than men. I am looking into Anna. That's a good question in regards to Elon Musk and Jeffrey Epstein case. I did see that he was actually allowed to be subpoenaed and have to give a deposition, and I am looking into it. If there's anything there of worthiness, I'm going to actually take into it. But some of the things I'm still following up on, just so that you know, we still have Marilyn Manson going on, that civil case. We have several indictments in the works for, unfortunately, ex-President Trump, and we still have the financial indictment that he's been charged with there. We still have several of the cases with E. Jean Carroll that are still open, including a rumor that she may be filing a new defamation just from his recent statements after the verdict. There's still the appeal going on there. We have Sarah Boone. We have Courtney Clenny. We have the Rose Petal murder. We have Craig. Um, we have Samuel Bankman Fried, one of the hugest things since Bernie Madoff as far as, investments and hoodwinking people out of money. I'm still looking at that one because that one's quite enticing because of the international law that's involved in the setup of the companies and because it's crypto and not that many people know that much about it. It seems like everyone agrees about taking time. Yes, you don't want them coming back too quick to say that they were biased. You want to know that they were thoughtful. You want to make sure, that they took the time. Take time and go through it all. And I have faith in this jury. I do. I actually believe they're really going to consider it. I think they have more to consider the way that the prosecution laid out the case and even the way that Philip Cohen and Sean Hawley went back at everything. They have much more to consider, you know. Hey Jay Dice, nice to see you. Oh, don't worry, there's always replay. And I'm glad that you're a new sub. Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying so and thank you for the support. Yep, Trump and karma keep dancing, Anna. I agree. And I don't want to think that, I don't want everybody to think I'm just bashing because it's Trump. The legal cases are quite fascinating, especially the one in regards to the Mar-a-Lago documents. I mean, that's big news for me. That has a lot of precedent options in there to go for and things that I'm just curious as to how it's going to play out. But on that, I think I'm going to end for tonight. For all of you that are part of the Discord, please meet us over there in a little while because Game Master Quiz has a night of Wednesday entertainment waiting for us over there for all kinds of things. For those of you that are my moderators, thank you so much for being here, making this easy for me, keeping that chat going, keeping the conversation going. I appreciate you guys more than you know. I don't get to say it often, but I tell YouTube about it every damn chance I get. You guys rock, all of you. For all of you that join me here to have the conversations, thank you. It's for you that we continue the lives so that you have some place to talk about it and ask questions. And if there's anything else that you want to know in regards to anything that I'm covering, you can always hit me up on the back of one of those videos or in my DMs and just ask, and I will look into it. I think I've gotten back to everybody that's asked anything. And I usually will put out the information the best I can, especially in regards to like Allen charges, what happens in regards to a mistrial. It doesn't mean it's all over. Okay. It does get a little messy because it does look like strong arming when you do Allen charges. There's a lot of speculation back and forth on whether it should or not force them to go back and try again, but it happens. And sometimes then they can just grieve. Sometimes it's just frustrating and it's uncomfortable. Like we talked about, this is an uncomfortable trial, and the jury's decision obviously is uncomfortable for them. There's a man's life at hand. We've got a long time frame going on here. We've got a lot of extraneous information in regards to harassment and carrying on. There's a lot to consider. Thank you. Anyway, thank you for tonight. I will see you all again at the end of the week.